Director of Player Scouting, Dan Larmer. Dan, for those who may not know the process of getting someone who you may have never heard from before, never spoken to making them the newest member of the Bloomington Bison, what goes into that?
Well, players come to our attention in any number of areas. Sometimes we'll have agents who will reach out to us. Sometimes players will reach out to us directly. Other times we'll be watching games and another player that is in that game will come to our attention, whether it's a major junior player or a player out of college hockey. And then we start doing some background work on the player that we've identified that we'd like to bring in, and we'll reach out to former coaches or former players that player has played with, just to make sure we're bringing in a good person and a player that will not only add to our organization on the ice, but in the locker room and in the community. And we want to bring good people in. And then we reach out to them, and find out what their goals and their aspirations are, and if Bloomington would be a place that they would like to come and play. So we want to make sure it's a good fit for the organization and a good fit for the potential incoming player.
Imagine that can be tough sometimes if you think somebody maybe they look really good on the stat sheet, really good on the ice, but then you find out that they might not fit within the culture or what you're looking for as a person off the ice.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into building a roster. Sometimes you're looking for a certain type of player to fill a certain role, and even though he's a player is a good player and a skilled player, but maybe we've already got a player that fills whatever that role may be, and we're looking for a player that can come in and kill penalties, or we can look for a player that's going to come in and provide a physical presence or be a defensive player. And sometimes it's more than just looking at guys that can score goals and skate fast. We're looking for guys that certainly can fill roles that we need filled, and that's ideally that's how you build a competitive lineup. There's got lots of players that you're looking to fill, and guys have to fit the roles that we need filled, because you can't bring in the same type of player over and over, because that's not ideally how a roster is constructed.
Talk me through the difference between now we're halfway through the first week of camp in year two compared to this time last year. You were given a blank slate this time last year to try and find roughly around 20 men that build what you want. And now this year, there's quite a few returning players, but you also have some new talent on the ice. So what have you seen in just the difference between year one and year two here in training camp?
Well, yeah, there has been a significant difference. Last year we were an expansion franchise. We really didn't start reaching out to players till after the organization was even announced. So we were into the middle of June. By that time, existing teams have had a bit of a head start on us and had reached out to a number of players. We reached out to players last year, and they'd already made commitments to other teams, or they already had 5 or 6 other teams that had reached out to them, and we were kind of late to the party. And this year was different in significant ways. We now are no longer an expansion franchise, so we've got a year's worth of proof in the pudding, so to speak, where we can show players that here's what our locker room looks like, here's what our apartments are like. We've built a culture here that players know about, and they speak with other players around the league. Last year, players are like anybody else. They don't like uncertainty. And when you're an expansion franchise and you reach out to players, they don't really, there's no track record to lean on. And like I said, players like to know how an organization is run. They like to know what the community is like. They like to know what their working environment is going to be like. And we try to really make sure that we take care of the players here in Bloomington. Our locker room and our facilities are first class. The support we've got from the community, the support from ownership is where it begins, and management and the off-ice people do such a great job. We've really done a good job of building a strong environment for the players. And as I said, word travels. So this year when we reached out to players, they were happy to hear from Bloomington, whereas, to be honest with you, a year ago you're reaching out and there's a lot of uncertainties, and that's the first thing players kind of think about with an expansion franchise. So year two is, we've been able to build on what we, add to what we built on in year one, and we think we're ready to go stronger for year two.